Hi everyone, thanks so much for listening to another episode of Dogman Encounters Radio. I'm Vic Cundiff and I'll be your host for the show. Before we bring on tonight's guest, if you've had a Dogman encounter and would like to speak with me about it, whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you. If you've had a Sasquatch sighting and would like to be a guest on Bigfoot Eyewitness Radio, please go to bigfooteyewitness.com and submit a report. If you listened to episode 334, you heard tonight's guest talk about a dogman hunt he and two other men went on, and to say that show was controversial is a huge understatement. Anyway, on that show we ran out of time, so I didn't have a chance to ask him any questions about the hunt. Luckily though, he's agreed to come back on and answer my questions about it tonight. Having said that, before we bring him on here, I'm going to remind you that just like on episode 334, he wishes to keep his identity hidden. With that in mind, he's going to go by the name Brad, and I'm going to digitally alter his voice. Alright, let's bring him on now. Brad, thanks so much for coming back on.
Thanks for having me again, Vic.
Oh, you're welcome. Brad, you're featured on episode 334 of the show, and for the listeners who missed that episode, please give them a brief bio on yourself.
Born and raised in Southern California, 51 years old, getting ready to move out of state. 2 daughters that are both grown. Whole life I've been a risk taker and a what you might call an adrenaline junkie, and just completed the last bit of college in my life that I was going to, and looking forward now to starting to make money again after a divorce and some other things that happened on a personal level. That's about it.
Well, it goes without saying, you sure have lived a lot of life in your 51 years on this earth. I'm impressed. Considering the acerbic response you got after coming on episode 334 and telling us about the dogman hunt you went on, why did you decide to come back for a second show and answer questions about what you did?
I decided to come back because I think some people misunderstood my intentions and what my plans were and what the overall thought process was on why I did this, and they certainly misunderstood who I am as a person based on their comments. I mean, I would say 3/4 of them were some form of an attack on me, but I don't think they're warranted. And there's some other things that I'd like to talk about. But the main reason that I came on is I'm sure there were some questions that I saw that I probably should have answered when I was here the first time, because I gave a lot of information and we did a long interview. But those are basically the reasons why I wanted to clear the air and answer some questions that I thought were valid and give some opinions on some of the things.
It's funny you mentioned that, because I did see a lot of comments like you just mentioned that totally seemed to miss the boat on what you said on that show. With that in mind, before I get into all these questions I have prepped for you, would you like to clear the air on any of those things?
Yeah, the first and foremost is that, if you go to dogmanencounters.com, there's not a disclaimer at the bottom that says, "Hi, I'm Vic Cundiff, and I will, report your dogman encounters if I'd like the actions and the people that are depicted in the stories and the encounters that are told." I mean, so the idea that Vic was somehow responsible for this, or this was somehow his fault for allowing somebody like me on the show, is ridiculous. First and foremost, Vic told me not to do this before I even put the plan together. Number one. Number two, he's not my dad. I can do whatever I want to do, and it was my decision to do what I did. And yet people are taking it out on poor old Vic as though somehow this is his fault because he had me on the show. And I just want to say it on the air that, it's ridiculous. If you're going to blame someone to be mad for what happened and take it out on me, we should be grateful that Vic reports these stories to us. Regardless of whether he personally likes them or doesn't like them, his job is to report the story. And I think we should all keep that in mind, that whether he likes it or not isn't really the point. It's his job is to get the story to those of us who know about these animals. Number one. Second thing would be, I guess I mispronounced some Indian names. I'm not Indian, number one. And number two, I'm not from Oklahoma. So I don't hear these names a lot. I think I mispronounced Wachita as Wachita, something along those lines. I was reading in the comments. I'm assuming these were by Indian people or Native American people. I certainly didn't mean to offend any of those folks by my pronunciation. I just didn't know how to pronounce it. Again, I'm not from Oklahoma. I'm not Indian. And so so if I said anything that upset anybody or, I mispronounced it that offended anybody, I didn't do it on purpose. So forgive me for that. One guy commented about why I didn't take a camera with me, which was the original plan. If Vic were to tell you about our original conversation, I was going to take a camera and get pictures of it. And the reason why we didn't do cameras is because, as Vic rightly pointed out, that even if I were to get pictures that were totally excellent quality, they would just say they were fake and say that, this is all a hoax and force me through some other means to say it was a hoax. And so the only real way that you could force their hand to admit that they're real would be a body. And that's where that came from. So it's the reason why we didn't wear a camera. I wish we would have had a camera now, looking back on what we went through. Maybe had one mounted on our head or something, but that's the reason why there was no camera used, because we went out there with the intent to have a body so that we wouldn't need a camera. The idea that I'm somehow bloodthirsty, I'm not a hunter. Not because I don't think that men have the right to hunt. They absolutely do. It's just I don't have the ability to pull the trigger on Bambi. I never have been able to kill animals. I mean, even when it's something to eat, right? It would be hard for me personally to do it. I'm not a hunter, and that's the reason why I'm not a hunter, is because I'm not going to go kill an animal for no reason, period. But the idea that these are somehow like furry little woodland creatures that are scurrying around waiting for us to pass by so they can grab our hand and we can sing Kumbaya together out in the forest is completely ridiculous. These are apex pack animals that are responsible for the death, mutilation, the kidnapping, and who knows what else of, in my opinion, probably tens of thousands of people since these creatures were put here. Who knows how long ago. But they've taken people, they've killed people, they've terrorized people. These are not little deer running through the forest sniffing flowers. So the idea that I was some bloodthirsty guy out there to kill animals, kill these animals just for the thrill of killing it. No, I went out there with the sole intent of killing one to prove it. So maybe we could save 1, 2, 3 lives down the road, people being more safe and traveling in groups and arming themselves when they go into the forest. That was the intent of this. It wasn't to be able to hold up the trophy. I mean, sure, it would be cool to say that I was the guy that did it, but that wasn't the intent of this. And I'm certainly not bloodthirsty by any stretch. That's the reason why I'm not a hunter. I do love guns, but target shooting and stuff, I don't hunt animals. And maybe that was one of the reasons why I wasn't successful. If I'd have been a better hunter, maybe I would have been successful. So let me see if there's anything else that comes to mind. Just the idea that I'm bloodthirsty is completely in error. I'm actually a really nice guy once you get to know me.
I'm glad you cleared the air for us on a lot of those things. After spending as much time as you have in the woods without having any dogman encounters until about 1 year ago, Brad, what are your thoughts on why you started to suddenly see them so regularly?
Well, I don't know if I'd say regularly, but it is weird that I saw them in 2 states, although the first one is by far the stranger of 2 because, it was after your show that I had my first encounter, which I always thought that's why, sometimes I still think, like, is this some sort of a government conspiracy to make me lose my mind? Because, like, I go on this show and I start watching or listening to these encounters, and then I have one with one of the, I don't know, it seems almost like something out of a movie script or something. I don't know. And the second one, I was seeking it out. So I went to an area where I knew there had been sightings, and one of the people that I was with at the time actually saw one in this area. So I don't plan on having it anymore. But if I do, I do, but I'm not planning on it. That's for sure. And nobody has followed me all the way to, that's another thing. A lot of the people seem to worry that they were going to follow me to California. It's been almost 4 months and I haven't seen any dogmen. So I think I may be okay.
Well, I hope you are. After listening to you talk about what happened on your dogman hunt, another one of the most common questions the listeners had was one I wondered about too. Did you put any thought into the possibility that those dogmen might lash out at people in that area after you wounded them the way you did?
Yeah, I guess when you point it out and you say it like that, but the reverse of that would be, aren't they going to be more likely to stay away from people if people have done this to them now? So, they always seem to be in the driver's seat during encounters, as far as what I've seen and heard and listened to on your show, is that they're always the one that seems to be dictating how the encounter is going to go. So the area that we went to, first and foremost, isn't one that's frequented by very many people. Mark told me that he hunts there occasionally, and there's other hunters that go there, but as far as like tourists and stuff, it's kind of not that. So I'm not really worried that, there's going to be a big Dogman attack, but if something like that were to happen, I mean, I guess I would feel bad about it knowing what I know, but I can't say that I've stayed up at night thinking about it, that, they're just waiting now any more than they would have been normally to attack people. They're opportunists. I don't necessarily think they're evil. I just think they're creatures of force and they're opportunists. And if they get a chance and they can get a free meal or whatever they do, then maybe they're going to take advantage of it. So regardless of whether they were hurt by me or people that were with me, I mean, by now, I mean, they're probably, there's only one that's probably or maybe dead. The others are probably healed up by now. So I don't know, Vic. I didn't put a lot of thought into that, to be honest with you, but I suppose it's a possibility.
Well, unfortunately, dogmen aren't the once bitten, twice shy type. And speaking of that, did you ever wonder if those two men wound up paying a hefty price because of the two dogmen you shot?
Well, no, because that was on Tuesday and this happened on Friday. So those men were, well, the old man, I personally don't believe that old man was I believe he was some sort of an apparition. I'm not kidding. I know that sounds totally ridiculous, but I just can't believe that he would dive down the embankment so that we wouldn't see him anymore. I think he just disappeared. I really believe that. And the other guy, that happened Tuesday afternoon. We didn't encounter the dogmen until Friday afternoon. So no, I absolutely don't think those men suffered from it.
Yeah, hopefully they didn't. Was there ever a time in the planning stage where you started to second guess whether the reward of bagging a dogman justified the risks of trying to do so?
Well, I'd be lying if I didn't say that your voice was in my head a few times. You have a very distinct voice, and your voice was in my head a few times as I was making my plans. But I just felt like if I could do it, I guess you get caught up in your own, like you're a legend in your own mind, right? Where like I thought like somehow I could figure out a way that I could get the head somewhere and somebody would see it and go, wow, this guy, I don't know. Maybe it was just naivete, I guess you'd say, on my end, but I never thought though that the experience or what we went would cost as much. I'm trying to answer your question. I guess the answer would be no. That never occurred to me while I was planning it.
I see, that makes sense. I wondered about that. You told us why you went on that hunt, but when you did, you knew you were risking your life and the lives of the two other men. For the listeners who can't understand why you did that, what would you say to them about that?
Wow, you're busting me down here, brother. I guess you could say there's really no excuse, right? I mean, I knew what we were going. Well, I take that back. Mark knew too what we were going to do. John was really the only one that didn't really know what it was that we were going to do. I mean, he obviously discovered, but I told him up front, you got to understand, Vic, I didn't just, we weren't like 10 minutes from the site and I just sprung it on him. Oh, by the way, we're here to kill a dogman. Okay. And so we jump out of the van. That's not how it went. There was planning that went into this. And I told them both up front what we were trying to do, that there was a chance of danger. I didn't see that it would be dangerous, but they both knew that going in. So, it did occur to me when that last moment we were out there, when I told John to run for the van, that thought did occur to me. I was obvious, I think, when I told the story, right? Because I didn't want to I would have rather died myself than be responsible for somebody that was just coming with me because I asked him to, and then he ends up getting his life taken or gets hurt or whatever. I would have much rather been me, and that was the reasons why I took the actions that I did. To show you how oblivious I was to the Dogman and their capabilities and stuff. I originally, if you remember when we first talked, I wanted to take my daughter with me to go maybe kill one or wound one and get up close pictures of it. And that's when we talked about, you just aren't going to do the job, dude. They're not going to, they're not going to cut the mustard, right? So, and it just shows you how oblivious I was to going out there and doing what I did. In a lot of ways, I probably deserved to be dead for what I did. Tried to do, I mean, yeah, maybe my intentions were good, but, I put people's lives at risk. They were warned previously before we did it, but still, I would feel some responsibility if something had happened.
Yeah, unfortunately, a lot of things could have gone wrong that day, but fortunately, everything went right for you. So I guess we should probably play the glad game on that. But having said that, do you see there being any way that the Alpha knew you were there before John shot it?
Oh, that's okay. That brings up another point that I wanted to discuss, because somebody had asked, I'll get to that question in a second, before I forget the other one. Somebody asked why John, who was the long range shooter, why he didn't finish the job, and he was looking at the Dogman lying down and I was in the forest, right? Well, I forgot to mention this, but I wondered why why John just hadn't put a third round in it. While when it got up to its legs and it was shaking, why didn't he just put a third round? He had it broadside. He could have finished it with one more round for sure. And the reason he didn't was because right when he was getting ready to do that, he saw 1, 2, 3, and then a fourth come up. And he was afraid that if he shot at the Dogman from the direction that he was shooting from, they would have to go towards that sound. They would have to come directly at me, where I was standing, right? And so that's the reason why he didn't fire. But it did occur to him. Let's see. And now your question was,
do you see there being any way that the Alpha knew you were there before John shot it?
He sure didn't act like it. I mean, we were, again, this is, if I had to guess, I would say we were probably 550 to 600 yards from him. And he didn't look our way. He didn't, in the time that I saw him, I haven't talked to John in a while, but when we talked about it, he didn't say that he ever made contact. I think we were far enough out of earshot that even when he and I were yelling back and forth, they didn't seem to hear. So I don't know, maybe the wind was with us that day, but they didn't seem to hear. But it didn't appear to me that he was aware of our existence at all. And what I wonder is how John could have missed the shot by 6 inches down and 6 inches to the right. How does that happen? I'm still wondering about it now. The guy that's this good, supposedly this good, I don't know how he missed that shot. I really don't. But I don't know how I missed the shots I had or Mark had either. That's one of the things that makes me a little curious about these creatures, for sure.
After working your way closer to it, you said you got a good look at the Alpha. You gave us some details about his appearance on episode 334, but I want you to take your time now and describe him for us as accurately as you can from top to bottom.
Okay, I saw him. You got to remember, I saw the Alpha, if that's what he was. Again, I am a critical thinker, and so I don't know that he was the Alpha. I'm deducing that based on his size and way that the other animals acted towards him. But he appeared from distance. If you were looking with the naked eye, you could, 550, 600 yards away, you could see what looked like a dog creature, right? It was big. And then when you put up your binoculars and you start examining it, you can see just how big the creature is, because then you can see it in relation to rocks and trees and stuff like that. It was on all fours until there was something in the rocks that it was looking for or messing with, or there was an animal it had trapped or something, because it kept going down. It would go on all fours and it would sniff. Then it would kind of get up on its haunches and use its hands to reach in there and grab something and go back on all fours again. Then one time that it did stand up completely, as if it was almost giving its back a rest. That's what it looked like. It was black with I would say a reddish brown underbelly, but not completely. That one color was kind of a mixture of the black and the reddish brown. Very well endowed, appeared well endowed anyway, male, based on the rock. And when I got up closer to it, because I got probably within 120 yards of this animal. I would say that it was 9 feet based on when I got closer to the reference points. I would say the animal was 9 feet when it stood up. And that the other one, well, the other one that I saw stood up in front of me that was not that far from me, he was probably 7.5 feet. Like I said, they had the old people hands. That's how they look. That's how I call them. I don't know what people say, but gnarled over fingers with black fingernails, maybe 2 inches, very sharp teeth, much bigger than the average canine, but still in the same way of a canine, if that makes sense. Like they just look like their bite, I guess you'd say, or the way that their teeth are structured. They just look like a much bigger versions of a regular dog. That's what I saw. The coloring of the eyes, I think they were yellow like the first one I saw, but again, it wasn't night and it wasn't, I didn't see the bright shining eyes or anything. So I don't know for sure, but I thought they were yellow. I do know that these creatures are weak on their sides. They seem to have, I don't want to say plating because that would infer some sort of technology, and I don't think these are technological animals, but I think they have some sort of plating on their front and back or extra muscles or something that protects them, because they can take just incredible amounts of damage and recover, apparently. But on their sides, in between that front chest plate and the back hump or the back, when they go down on all fours, there's that 6-inch area between the front and the back, and they're weak there for sure. I know for sure they're weak there. So to anybody in the future that would keep that in mind, if it's ever necessary, right? Hopefully not. But when they first came up to the animal that was hurt, you guys are calling the alpha, they were sniffing his butt. They were sniffing underneath him. They looked like just a pack of really large dogs. I mean, they were sniffing his wounds. One of them was trying to lick one of his wounds. One of the ones that I think was a female was trying to put her head under his head. It's like they were trying to make him seem like it was okay, like he was going to make it. And he may have survived. I mean, I don't know. But they just very much acted like dogs to me, just big dogs. You don't really get the full understanding of what you're dealing with these animals until they stand up. That's the moment I think any of the people on your show, who've ever been on your show, would tell you. That's the moment when you realize you're dealing with something not of this world, let's say, when they stand up and they have this, I can't even put it into words. I really don't know the words, but when the one stood up in front of me and was sniffing the air because he heard the crackling of my walkie-talkie, that was the closest I got to having one standing up in front of me, because we were probably only 60 feet apart, maybe. I would say 50 feet apart, somewhere in that neighborhood. And it's when they stand up, it's just something else. I can't, to the people who've gone through it, they'll know what I'm talking about. But you don't really get the full measure of this animal until it stands up.
When you saw those other dogmen show up after John shot the alpha, were you convinced you were dead, or did you still have hopes you were going to make it out of there alive?
At that particular moment, I believed that I needed to be as quiet as I could. I believed that I had the ability. I was still far enough away that if I backed out carefully, I could avoid any type of conflict with these animals. But of course, because of my walkie-talkie, that thought went out the window. The only time, Vic, that I ever really felt, I think I said this in the first interview that we did about this experience, the only time that I felt truly wow, I could be in a lot of trouble was when I told John to run back to the van, and I was out there alone with at least two of them. Looking back on it now, the one that was hurt, the alpha, and then the one that stayed with them, those two never did anything. It was just the three that came after us. One went after Mark, and then two, I'm not sure they planned on coming after me specifically, but you know what I mean? They followed after me. I never saw the one that Mark did battle with. I heard the gunshot, but I never saw that one. And the other two I saw, I didn't see them up close. When John shot the one in the shoulder, and it rolled off to the side. I didn't really get a full estimation of the size because it was so quickly after when it got hit with the rifle round that it started to roll. It was only the one that I'm talking about where I got that full measure of their size. But anyway, to your point about feeling like I was that moment when I was by myself and I had both of my guns in my hands and my head was on a swivel, there was a moment there that I realized that I think I said this, that, you know, that I'm completely on my own right now. I mean, it's on my own wits. If I get out of this situation, it's through the help of God, number one, and number two, through my own paying attention. You know, I try not to, my whole life, Vic, I have tried to live by a policy of don't panic, because nothing good happens in any situation when you panic. Nothing. So, you know, I just kept telling myself, don't panic. You'll be all right. But that one moment, I did feel that pit of the stomach fear where this probably wasn't a good idea.
Do you think? Famous last words. I saw a lot of comments that were left for episode 334 stating that you should have stayed and killed the dogman you shot. Well, while I totally disagree with you going out to kill a dogman that day, your chance to kill one was lost the moment your first shots missed the mark. If you would have stayed and tried to finish what you started, I don't see there being any way you would have survived, so I can understand why you got out of there. It's really unfortunate though, because like I said earlier, anyone who went into that area after you did that was quite likely at much greater risk of being harmed or killed. That's one of the many reasons why I wish you wouldn't have tried to kill one in the first place. How far were you from John and Mark when that subordinate dogman heard the squelch from your radio and turned and looked your way?
I got to within about 120 yards, I would say, of the fallen Alpha. I hadn't looked through my binoculars yet when I was creeping over there. So I got to within about 120 yards of him. And then when I realized that when I looked through my binoculars to get a better look and I saw the other dogmen creatures show up, they kind of meandered around him for a bit. And then one of them seemed like he either smelled something or heard something or just was curious, you know, what had happened, because he took about maybe 4 or 5 steps in my direction. So we were probably 90 to 100 yards apart at this point, maybe a little less. And at first, he didn't hear me. He didn't sense that I was there. He just was looking in my direction. And then as I kept, you know, starting to back away, that's when my radio squelched, right? And then he took 4 or 5 more steps forward and then put his nose up into the air, right? And then after a few seconds, he stood up, maybe thinking he was going to get a better sense of smell. I don't know. Did that answer your question? I think that's what you asked me.
That did. And I can only imagine how much your heart jumped when your radio did squelch and he heard it. I can only imagine.
Yeah, that was a very, very terrifying moment, Vic. Now that I'm thinking back on it, that was probably because that's the moment that you know that they know that you're there. And so, of course, you know, there's that fear because they could have all just turned right at that moment and have attacked. I mean, they're too smart for that. That's not how they normally operate. But, you know, I might have been able to, if I had been thinking, and here I am grinding Mark about turning off the radio and then I forget to turn it off, right? I mean, I think now, if I hadn't done that, I might have been able to sneak out of there because they probably wouldn't have heard me. There was enough distance between us. I think I probably could have just backed out of there quietly and then said, hey, you know, there's 5 of these. Let's just go. But that's not how it happened.
Yeah, unfortunately. If you could go back and change anything you did that day, what would you do differently?
Well, a couple of things. I should have taken somebody with me who I trust that I just didn't feel confident enough in bringing up this story to. And that's the reason why. And I don't want to say who it is because I don't want to hurt their feelings why I didn't tell them about this. But there's somebody that I could have had come with me that would have helped tremendously because he's a trapper, like not a trapper. Well, that's not the right word. A hunter, and he's a camper guy and he's fishing all the time. He's one of those types of guys, right? And the reason that he and I are such good friends is because we're complete opposite. He's the type of guy that'll walk into a convenience store barefoot, whereas I would never even get out of the car barefoot, right? But I should have taken him with me because I think he would have supported me more, in the sense that I envision if he would have been with me instead of Mark, in other words, that it might have ended differently in a more positive way with better results. And that's all I'm going to say about him. This individual, he's probably listening. He knows what I'm talking about. He's years older than me, and I just respect him when it comes to his outdoor prowess, right? And I think if I would have had him with me, it might have been better, number one. Number two, I think if we were there again in that very same scenario, I would have stood on the bluff with John and just waited after, you're asking me, hindsight is 2020, right? So I'm telling you what I would do now. I would have stood on that bluff and waited until this animal wasn't moving at all anymore before striking out to go over to investigate it. Because then once we would have seen the other ones, we could have just said, oh, okay. And, we would have had a 300-yard head start towards the end. We probably would have been fine then. That, and I probably should have strapped in my Glock a little better so I didn't have to risk myself and these other guys to go back and get a gun that I foolishly dropped, and I know better than that. Those are the things that come to mind.
Well, I would have left the Glock where it was laying and headed for the van, but I understand why you went back. Did you ever ask the guys if they'd be interested in coming on the show with you to share the details of your encounter? If so, what'd they say?
Before I even contacted you, I asked both if they would want to come on with me. And of course, Mark said, absolutely not. I don't want anything to do with this. And he and I haven't really spoken. No, I won't say haven't really. We haven't spoken since this happened. I know I'm going to be seeing him again when I move to Oklahoma. So hopefully we can, mend the fences, but he wanted nothing to do with it. John, I think he's afraid that if he were to come on as who he really is, I think it might have an effect on his career. He's a real estate appraiser, and I think it might affect his job. I'm kind of in that boat too. That's the reason why, I'm hiding my identities, because I don't want people to think I'm crazy, because a lot of people think anybody who believes in these animals is crazy, but clearly, we're not the crazy ones, right? So, yeah, to answer your question, I asked both of them, and then I asked John again after we did the last show. I told him about all of the stuff I was taking in the comments. He just thought it was funny, and I said, you don't want to come on and defend me? And he's like, dude, I don't want nothing to do with that. That's all you. So I'm all you got.
Well, I'm just glad you decided to come on and talk about that experience. That's admirable. Thinking back on it, do you have any regrets about going out there and trying to kill one in the first place?
I think I regret talking about it more than I regret doing it, Vic. I don't believe in they were going to chase me all the way back to California stuff. I mean, some of these people, I don't know what to say, dude. I mean, they're going to follow me all the way back to California. Okay. I don't really regret doing what I did because I hurt those animals. I don't have any compassion for these creatures at all. I'm not saying that, I would just go out there and kill indiscriminately for no reason. But if killing one of these things could bring safety or could save lives in the future, I'm much more concerned with human lives than I am with whatever these creatures are. So the only regret I guess I have is that, I told the story to maybe people that looked at it from a perspective that I wouldn't have looked at it from. I really don't. I can't say I regret, other than, we did the show and then, you had to take some stuff for this too. But I probably, if I did it over again, I just wouldn't say anything about it, to be honest with you.
Well, in my opinion, you definitely did make a mistake by going out there, but at least I think you now see the errors in your ways of trying to do that. But I'm just glad knowing that, at least I think I know that you would never make that mistake again. And if we can say that, then in my opinion, that's a good thing. Since you made it home from that outing, how much trouble have you had dealing with what happened that day?
None. I mean, I don't want to say like it hasn't crossed my mind at all. I mean, that would be a lie. It has crossed my mind, and I've thought about like how I reacted and how I responded under stressful situations, right? Because, being the Gen Xer that I am, I never really had a war. My generation never really had a war except for, Desert Storm, which lasted 8 weeks, something like that. So I never really got to try myself in battle or anything. And so in some ways, it was good to see myself under pressure. Let's say that. See how I would react under pressure.
Well, you definitely got a good opportunity to find out the answer to that question. By asking that question, Brad, understand I wasn't asking you about the guilt that you might have felt. Now I was asking more about nightmares, PTSD from the trauma that you experienced, things like that. Did you have any issues like that after that experience that day?
I don't want to sound, because I know how it sounds like, oh, this guy thinks he's tough. I really don't think I'm tough or anything, but no, I really haven't had any. I mean, the first night that it happened when we were still out in Oklahoma, when I got home and I went to sleep, I had a little trouble sleeping that night, but that was because I was so amped up by what had happened. It took me a while to fall asleep that night, but, as far as like nightmares or Dogmen showing up at my bedroom window or post-traumatic stress syndrome, I really haven't experienced any of that. And as far as I know, I mean, I think Mark experienced it a little bit from what some of the people in the comment section said. Like, that's why he acted the way that he did. So maybe I shouldn't have been so hard on him. Maybe I could go back and say, and you asked me if I had any regrets, maybe I was a little bit hard on Mark, but you're dealing with somebody that's a combat veteran, so you assume certain things, and maybe I shouldn't have made those assumptions. But he's probably dealt with it more than I have. John, as far as I know, I don't even think John thinks about it anymore. He's too busy at work. So to answer your question, Vic, I would say no.
Yeah, I don't want you to have to deal with issues like that, so I'm glad to hear that. Well, Brad, it's about time for us to get out of here, but before we do you have any closing comments you'd like to share?
Just that to any of the people that I offended, my presence offended from the show a few weeks ago, I certainly didn't come on to offend any of you or your sensibilities. My view of this situation with these animals is obviously different than yours. And if you guys want to believe that these are peaceful animals that are just trying to coexist with man, then I guess you're entitled to that. I just don't subscribe to that view. So if I upset you guys or my encounter was too gun related or with the intention of being violent, yeah, that's because that's what we intended from the beginning, was to kill one of these things so we could force the government into admitting that they exist, which thereby might save some lives in the future. I realize that's probably not going to happen now after talking with Uncle Vic on many occasions, but still, that was the intention. So maybe you guys could cut me just a little bit of slack on that particular point right there. And if I offended anybody else with anything I said, I'm sorry. I certainly didn't mean to. I was just coming on to share a story that I thought would be interesting to the people, those of us who know about these animals. So don't do what I did. But don't not enjoy yourself out in our beautiful national parks. Just never go unarmed and never go into the forest at night, number one. And number two, if you have to go by yourself into the forest, never go unarmed, because some arms is better than no arms, because at the very least, they don't like loud noises, and gunfire is loud noises. So just keep that in mind when you're out by yourself in the woods.
That's a really good point, and unfortunately, dogmen aren't the only thing you have to worry about out there. But having said that, I want to thank you so much for coming back on to answer all these questions. Like we've already established, I know it wouldn't be easy to come on and do, but you did it, and I think you deserve a lot of credit for that. Thanks again so much. Have a great night. If you've had a Dogman encounter of your own and would like to speak with me, whether in private or on the show, please go to dogmanencounters.com and submit a report. I'd love to hear from you.